Hello, everyone. I'm not sure who is here watching or waiting, but I want to make sure that we are good to go. As you can see, I'm a little tired this morning, but such is life. Uh, I want to make sure that we can have a good discussion and that people are able to watch this either live or on tape. I have set up for comments if any of you are interested in asking questions later. That's allowed. But in the meantime, I think I'll generally wait only about a few more seconds because this is going to be available afterwards. So, my name is Joseph Solar. I am the person who's going to be hosting these occasional seminars on specific topics of African American history and other related issues, such as it was. As you can see, I haven't had a haircut in a while, so I'll be one of those people looking shaggy for a bit. This is an interesting format for me. I'm a professor at Rowan College of Burlington County, adjunct, and we had to transition to online, and I made sure that my students couldn't see me so I could show up in a t-shirt and not have to brush my hair, but I brushed my hair this morning. So let me tell you about myself first, and then we'll move forward from there. So I am an adjunct professor at Rowan College of Burlington County. I also am an adjunct professor at Pierce College and Alvernia University. Adjunct professoring means I teach classes on contracts, and so I have to teach at multiple schools. If you haven't heard, adjuncts do not get paid very well, which is a shame, but the one positive thing is the flexibility to teach different courses. At Rowan College of Burlington County, RCBC from now on, I teach African American history and U.S. history. I've been teaching those courses for about 5 years, and it is quite exciting. That's how Lauren and I came to partnership. She was a student of mine several years ago. My background, which is also very important. I received my undergraduate degree in history and African American studies from Harvard University. I studied with Henry Louis Gates Jr. and Cornel West and Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, Jamaica Kincaid, Cheryl Greenberg, vast number of remarkable faculty. When I moved to Philadelphia, I worked in the nonprofit sector and then enrolled in Temple University, where I received my master's and PhD in urban education from those institutions, which allowed me to explore issues not just of race, but class and geography relevant to how we create and do or fail to do, as the case may be, education in cities and urban areas. It was a focus on kind of the opportunities that exist in cities and the challenges that are unique to cities. So the idea of spreading education more generally has always been part of my personal agenda. Why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this for a very particular reason, and the reason is that as we sit in, here we are on Facebook Live, as we sit in this world of social media, we are bombarded with information, memes, quotes, ideas, images, etc. And one of the most important things we can do whenever confronted with those things is ask, who made this? And where did they get their information? Because all too often, individuals are sharing information that is simply not true, or might be true, but isn't thoroughly fact checked, isn't sourced as properly as it should be. And this leads to a degradation in the conversation. We do not speak to each other well. We cannot come to good shared understandings unless we understand reality, unless we have the facts right. And so I decided that for this very first meeting, I would engage in one of the memes that has been circulating. I did not save it, unfortunately, but that's okay because it's false. And so, what I wanted to talk about and kind of begin to shed some light and through this understand my goals for this is this meme circulating about Aunt Jemima. So, the Quaker Oats Company recently announced that they will be removing Aunt Jemima as a brand for their pancakes and syrup. As often happens when there are things that are changed, people were very upset, very angry that Aunt Jemima was going away, which is very interesting because it doesn't really ultimately matter. She's just an image. But nonetheless, people were very upset, and they began sharing this meme about Aunt Jemima being a real woman named Nancy Green who sold her pancake recipe and became a millionaire. And now, because Aunt Jemima is not a bottle of syrup or on a box of pancakes, somehow we are dishonoring Nancy Green and forgetting her story. So this is problematic for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that there is no evidence whatsoever that Nancy Green was a millionaire at all. Also, there is little evidence but for a lawsuit by a descendant that she had anything to do with creating the recipe for the pancake mix. In fact, all evidence suggests that it was individuals looking to get into the pancake business with their quick flour who hit upon an idea to use a mascot named Aunt Jemima, who was based on a character from a song that was popular at the time. And one of the things that I had said to you was that we needed to always check our sources. And so I will tell you authoritatively that I am using as one source, although there are multiple sources, an article called The Mammy Caricature from the Museum of Jim Crow at Ferris State University. Now, obviously, fact-checking is not always going to be perfect, but I will suggest to individuals out there who might see memes or ideas that they're interested in, always look for confirmation through multiple sources. Universities might not be perfect, but the construction of the university is such that we check and double check and recheck our sources at all times. And so this article about that references the story of Aunt Jemima is from a university source that's been fact-checked and has been live for several years. I will include a quick link to a video, don't watch it now, about Aunt Jemima from this museum at Ferris State University. So, back to Aunt Jemima. The meme about her being forgotten is problematic because it's factually inaccurate, but a step further than that is not just that it's factually inaccurate, but it also undermines its very own premise, because the idea of the meme is that by taking away Aunt Jemima, now we do not know the story of the woman. Except that I would argue that no one knew the story of Nancy Green anyway, until Quaker Oats decided to take Aunt Jemima away, and all of these people got angry and began sharing this meme But of course, the meme is factually incorrect, so they still don't know the true story of who Nancy Green was. And in truth, or at least according to the evidence and multiple sources, Nancy Green was a woman who was hired to act out a persona called Aunt Jemima, who was essentially just a mascot for pancake flowers. She was like Ronald McDonald, in essence, in that there was no Aunt Jemima who made pancakes. And the way the story is, they bring this woman, Nancy Green, to perform as Aunt Jemima at the World's Fair in Chicago, and she would dress up and play a part of Aunt Jemima and serve pancakes and tell cute stories about the South and her history. But there's so much more than just the fact that this was a character, a fictional character played by a woman who needed a job. Because Aunt Jemima is a character specifically evoking a character from slavery. And this character is called the Mammy. One of my former students once got me this that she found in New Jersey. And what you see, and just to show that this isn't a Southern phenomenon, is a Mammy character right here, and it's essentially a shopping list. And it says, "We needs." And what you see when you look at this image is a representation that could be an Aunt Jemima, which proves the point that Aunt Jemima was not real. She was a character, but not even a character, but what we call a caricature. In other words, a character that is meant to exaggerate certain features. You see that there is English up here that is incorrect. You see the skin is jet black, gigantic bright red lips, and a hair kerchief. These are features of the character that was called the Mammy. So then we get to the question, so why would there be a character called a Mammy? The story goes deep. One of the realities of American life is that the United States was founded as a nation that practiced slavery. It was the systematic and violent exploitation of the labor of Africans and African Americans. And I'll step aside for one quick second to talk about terminology. We often see the word black people or black Americans with a capital B. And understand I will often use that term black people or black Americans with a capital B because it is a socially constructed idea that indicates descendants of people from Africa who lived in the United States, Canada, all throughout the Americas, many, if not most of whom were brought here as captives to be sold into slavery. And so African Americans specifically refers to those black people who live in the United States descended from Africans. But black people could include Jamaicans, Brazilians, Puerto Ricans who have African blood in them and who are connected to that slave trade. So anyway, back to that slave trade. After the Civil War, slavery ended. And because the war had been fought and was traumatic, very traumatic, hundreds of thousands of people died, the individuals who had led this rebellion in defense of slavery were eager to try to change the story because it did not look well on them that they had caused an extremely bloody, destructive, and violent war simply to defend their, quote, right to violently exploit the labor of black people. And so we see characters developing who are meant to prove or justify that slavery really wasn't that bad. And I'll probably have another episode about the original such character named Jim Crow. But suffice to say, by the time Aunt Jemima becomes a character selling pancakes, there was already an extensive set of characters that people impersonated very often, if not most often, white people who would put black tar or burned cork on their faces to impersonate black people. And so this brings up this issue: why create these characters? Well, when one is on the wrong side of history, one does not like that point of view. And when one considers this Mammy character, the Mammy character had several things that always indicated who she was. She always had her hair tied up in a bandana. She was always overweight, and she was always extremely dark-skinned. And the reason why is they wanted her specifically to look unattractive for reasons which are not appropriate for children. And so I won't get into that now, but parents and adults watching, there are stories understanding why they tried to show the Mammy as unattractive. But women in slavery were never overweight. Okay, I won't say never. I would say that more than likely they would not be, because one of the realities of people living in slavery was malnourishment. People who lived in slavery would not be very well fed. And so right off the bat, the representation of this woman is fraudulent. It implies a kind of bountiful life of great food and abundant food, and this was simply not the case. She also was happy in her place. She was happy to take care of the white family, to protect the white family, to nurture the white family, and she valued the institution of slavery, and she was portrayed as enjoying her position as a slave. The actress Hattie Mcdaniel represented a character that didn't even get a nickname Aunt. They just called her Mammy in the movie Gone with the Wind. And if you watch Hattie McDaniel's portrayal of Mammy in Gone with the Wind in the 1930s, this was already an established character. And in fact, Hattie McDaniel would play that character many times. And just to really, really rub it in even more about kind of the normal, what was normal for a Mammy, Hattie McDaniel actually would darken her own skin because she was considered too light-skinned to represent a Mammy. And related note, she was nominated for and won an Oscar for Gone with the Wind for supporting actress, but because she was black, she wasn't allowed to attend the Academy Awards. So just remember that. So what's with this Mammy character? So you create this character and you show people that slavery is a good thing, that maybe even ending slavery was a bad thing, and that we need not worry. But the real goal of this was to persuade white people not to worry about the conditions in which African Americans lived. It was to persuade white people that they perhaps had been wrong in their negative views of slavery, that the Civil War that ended slavery might actually have been a mistake, because here is this character, Mammy, who was happy to live in slavery and whose circumstances were such that she could take care of the white family. She was really well fed. She was just a caretaker role in the household, and it was a justification. Now, to bring back the fact that she's called Aunt Jemima, well, you might have also heard of Uncle Ben and rice. The terms aunt and uncle we think of as family terms, right? Your mother or father's brother or sister is your aunt or your uncle. In slavery households, older enslaved men and women would be called aunt and uncle to indicate that they had some role in the family as caretakers of the family. This would be a title, if you will, applied to household slaves and the elderly. There was, of course, the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, and then again, Uncle Ben. Hattie Mcdaniel even played another character in a Will Rogers movie, and someone called Aunt Dizzy. So these characters persist. And if you look into American history, you will see representations of Aunt this and Uncle this everywhere, not just Uncle Ben's rice, which is also problematic for the exact same reason as Aunt Jemima, but Aunt Jemima. But long-term consequences, what does it mean? We have this created character that everyone is familiar with. She exists in multiple places and multiple forms. Not to put up another link for more information. And people grow to simply expect that this is what a mammy is, that this is a mammy character. And so with Aunt Jemima, when the man or men who created the pancake formula, flour formula, when they decided to create a mascot called Aunt Jemima, they were trying to trade in on this nostalgia that by the 1890s was permeating the United States for good old days back in slavery. Because, of course, in the 1890s, we see lots of change. It is in the 1890s that southern states began passing laws that segregated the South. Those laws that separated black people from white people wouldn't allow them to sit in the same theaters or the same restaurants or enter the same doors or drink from the same drinking fountains or ride in the same trolley cars or any of these things. And so when passing laws that are so fundamentally unjust and at odds with what the United States is, one has to present an image of, well, this is okay and this is the way it's supposed to be, and Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and many other characters could just represent this is just the best way of it. And throughout the 1890s, we see a lot of violence around voting as the last government officials from the South who were black were being driven out of office, sometimes violently, like in the case of Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. And so Mammy trades on this nostalgia, and people could see this and say, oh yes, Mammy. You know, the Mammy in the household is always that great cook, and she takes care, and so I can trust these pancakes are going to be great pancakes. And this image can circulate throughout the country, and it has a twofold purpose. One, it trades on the already existing belief about the value of these supposedly happy servants who are such great cooks taking care of the white household, but also reinforces the notion that there are these black women who happily serve white households, taking care of their kids, cooking food, and this image spreads throughout the entire country and becomes the dominant perspective. And in fact, when you look at Aunt Jemima, she was portrayed with that kerchief and her dark skin all the way through the 1960s, and during the civil rights movement, they begin to change her image a bit, and ultimately they take the kerchief off and just make her a black woman. But nonetheless, she was indicative of this subservient role of black women. And in fact, the Aunt Jemima brand became so popular that Disney, when Disneyland opened in California, they actually had a restaurant dedicated to Aunt Jemima. And just like you can go to Disneyland today and pose for a picture with Princess Belle or Gaston or any of the Disney characters, people who went to the Aunt Jemima restaurant in Anaheim could pose for pictures with Aunt Jemima, underscoring again that Aunt Jemima was a fictional character. She was invented and created to serve a purpose. Multiple women would play that role over the years, not just Nancy Green, who was, of course, the subject of this meme. And it was a character whose roots are specifically in the defense of an unjust institution, slavery. And it is fictional in that the reality of enslaved people working in the household was not what was represented and personified by this Aunt Jemima character. And those of you who are adults out there, you can look into this further. There's a book, I'm going to link to this book, that talks about more broader issues of the black image in the white mind and how we tried to present these images of black people, African Americans specifically in the US, but other countries as well, simply so that we could kind of sidestep the issue of whether slavery was wrong, whether segregation laws were wrong, whether the circumstances and conditions under which African Americans had to live and work in the South and in the North increasingly over the years were fair and just. Because if you can portray and show people as being happy, Aunt Jemima was happy, Uncle Ben was happy, then we don't need to worry about whether they are being subject to injustice or not. Because if they were, they wouldn't be happy. And so if Aunt Jemima's happy, then the system works, the system is good, we don't need to worry about it, we can just sit down and eat our pancakes and not be troubled by the difficulties presented by racial injustice in America. And this is why Aunt Jemima is problematic, even though people do not remember her stories. Even the fictional story that's being passed around on a meme, she is rooted in a deeply unjust idea, and her character was created in service to, well, to make money, to make profit, but in service to a nostalgia for a world that never existed. A world that, in the imaginary minds of racist and white supremacist people, slavery was a good thing, and we didn't need to worry about the conditions and lives of African Americans living in slavery. I see there's about 26 people watching right now. If any of you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. I will try to answer them in the next 3 or 4 minutes. I don't want to go overly long because I want these to be digestible and understandable to people. But I will be exploring deeper issues of how slavery developed, some of these other images and ideas, what's problematic with them, and I'll be sharing resources as appropriate where you need it. Definitely check out the Jim Crow Museum. There's also a documentary that is not accessible online, but that you might be able to borrow from the library or stream, called Ethnic Notions, which was the first documentary to cover these issues of how we present black people to the American public. So I will wait a few seconds if anyone has any questions. Well, what I hope is that you'll have the chance to take a look at the books or the Jim Crow Museum or the YouTube video about Aunt Jemima specifically, so that you are able to get a better understanding of why people feel offended by this character. Remember that when we create things, the act of creativity is not just for the fun of it. There's always a message or a meaning, right? To go back to the Ronald McDonald metaphor, McDonald's was strategizing to go after children, and so they used a clown because people like clowns, right? So there's always a sense that these images appeal to the consumer market or they're not created. The Aunt Jemima creators believed that this happy image of a mammy called Aunt Jemima would appeal to their public, and so they created her. They hired someone to interpret her, and according to at least one source that I read, when Nancy Green was performing as Aunt Jemima at the Chicago World's Fair, she would tell stories and jokes about how great things were back on the plantation when she was a slave. And again, if you want to sidestep the issue of whether slavery was just or unjust, which it's unjust in a society that is created on the idea of all men are created equal. One way to sidestep that issue is, again, to have somebody talk about how great it was. And if you can have that woman be a black woman herself talking about how great slavery was, then it's very similar to a lot of things we're seeing today, where in our fights we try to cite black voices because, of course, if they support us, or if they don't. And so there's always that issue that's involved. For the children who might be watching, always remember to question the sources that you see. Always look and always investigate before you reshare. I always say this: it's perhaps even more important to investigate the source if it says everything you already know. If you agree with it completely, then definitely check it, because there's a bigger chance that you're missing something simply because you're seeing what you want to see. So, if there are no questions out there, and I still don't see any, I'm going to wrap this up. Those of you who came and watched, I want to thank you for coming on board. I hope you've learned a few things that are interesting and useful to you. I will be exploring more topics, including kind of the inventions of these racist ideas, how we perpetrated them and permeated them, but also, of course, more exciting things such as stories of individuals in American history who were models of success and achievement and persistence and resilience in the face of discrimination and in the face of racism. Okay? All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on board. I will talk to you soon, and have a great rest of your day. Please feel free to ask questions on the Educating for Change board, and I will try to answer or provide you with resources for thorough answers as soon as I can. All the best. Have a great day.